This is a brief lecture on dependent samples, also known as matched pairs. We're given two samples that have same size, they are matched, and there is a relationship between them. The keywords in these problems are before and after. If we're going to use the calculator, we're going to store before data in list 1, L1, and after data in list 2, L2. Let's take a look at the example here. We have 8 randomly selected adults that joined a special diet. Before they joined the diet, they were weighed. And after the diet, they were also weighed. And the list provides the weight of these 8 randomly selected adults. So the first person was 175 pounds before the diet, and it was 160 pounds after the diet. And for the second person, 165 before diet and 155 after diet, and so on and so forth. So we begin first by storing before data in L1 and after data in L2. And then we're going to use the calculator to put the difference of these two samples in L3. Our objective is to find the mean of difference data, which is D bar, and also standard deviation of the difference data, which is SD. Now, since we have the difference data stored in L3, we're going to go to stat, calculate one variable stats using L3, and whatever x bar is, that would be the value for D bar. And whatever the value of Sx is, that would be the value for standard deviation of a difference data. We're also interested to find the confidence interval for the mean of all differences, which we refer to that as mu d. So mu d would be a confidence interval, and to find it using your TI calculator, you can go to stat, tests, t interval, and then we use input data and the content of L3 with frequency 1. And when it comes to perform testing, hypothesis testing that is, your null hypothesis will be mu d equal to 0, and your alternative hypothesis would be mu d not equal to 0 for two-tailed test, mu d greater than 0 for the right-tailed test, and mu d less than 0 for a left-tailed test. And to find the critical values using TI, we use program tval with the degrees of freedom n minus 1, where n is the number of data. In that example, we had 8 adults, so n is equal to 8. And to find a compute a test statistic and p-value using TI, we use stat, tests, t-test, once again with the content of list 3. Okay, let's get started. First, we're going to make sure that all the lists are cleared up. To do that, we're going to go to second, plus, option 4, and then enter. I also want to make sure that none of the lists are missing, so I'm going to go to stat. Under the edit option, I'm going to go to option number 5 for the setup editor, and then I'm going to hit enter. Now, if we go to stat and then pick up option number 1 for edit, you will see that there is nothing in L1, L2, or L3. So we're going to have to put the before information in L1 and after information in L2. Okay, so I went ahead and entered the before data in L1 and after data in L2. But right now I'm in list 2. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to right arrow to jump to L3 and then up arrow to L3. So right now L3 is darkened. In other words, it is highlighted. I want to put the difference of L1 and L2 in L3. To do that, I'm going to go to second 1 for L1 minus second 2 for L2 and then press enter. Now, as you see, the difference of L1 and L2 is already stored in L3. So from all the calculation we do from this point on, we're not going to work with L1 and L2 because the difference of L1 and L2 are stored in L3. Okay, let's go ahead now and find D bar and SD. We go to Stat, we go to Calculate, we go to one variable stat. We're going to use L3 for our list and then calculate. So the value of D bar would be 5.25 and the value for SD would be 13.22. If I want to find confidence interval for the mean of all differences, I go to Stat, I go to Tests, I go to T interval. For the input, I pick data, and for list, I'm going to pick list 3, which is second 3. At 95% confidence level, I calculate. So the answer will be what we have here, negative 5.8 to 16.3. And similarly, if I want to find computed test statistic and p-value, let's say for a right tail test, I'm going to go to Stat, I'm going to go to Tests, I choose t-test. For the input, I use L3. For the mu 0, I'm going to put 0. I use list 3. I use frequency 1. And then I want to do the right tail test. So I pick greater than and I calculate. So my computed test statistic is 1.123 and my p-value is 0.149. I hope this presentation helps you understand the concept of dependent samples and matched pairs.